I'm basically starting with a very first AWS serverless service video. So we will start with very basic Lambda, how a Lambda function can be created, how our AWS serverless template uh, can be deployed to create a Lambda function on AWS account. We will also understand some bits and pieces of serverless.yaml file. Elements which are responsible to create Lambda functions automatically, and that's why it is called serverless. So let's start. I would definitely say everyone that please watch my previous videos because there are some prerequisite before you watch this video. Is to understand about AWS CLI, how you configure that on your local, and also at the same time AWS serverless, how you install that on local. So, yeah, I have some samples ready with me over here. So, if you see, these are the prerequisites. Um, so, we have to have a Node.js installed on your machine. Then you should have AWS CLI, and then a serverless framework, which is important if you want to deploy your stuffs directly from your local to the AWS account. I have already, created video on all these, which is the basic preliminary steps. So yeah, now let's go back to the important part where we see the demo. So over here, I will definitely go to this file, which is serverless YAML. So I just, want to highlight here, this is the important file, which is the backbone of your serverless framework, AWS serverless framework. It has all the important elements to play around with your AWS services. So let me explain you very, in very detail, like what are these AWS, this template all about, and what are those components inside this template. So over here, the very first thing that you see, service name. So this service name is the name of your serverless service. It is the logical grouping of your resources, functions, and configurations. So over here, you see SLS Lambda API. So just a simple demo service, which I have given. Coming to the next part, which is called provider section. So provider section gives an opportunity to you to define all kind of, general configurations that your YAML, serverless YAML need. Meaning the very first thing here, you see here name. This is the cloud provider for your service. So it's AWS. Now runtime environment is Node.js 18.x, meaning your environment for your Lambda function will be Node.js 18.x. So this is the version that you will be using for your Lambda function. Then we have region. So region, of course, you know that which region you want to create your Lambda function to be deployed. Then we have stage. So stage represent the deployment stage of your service. So example, we have dev, prod. So this is basically needed for your versioning of different environment. So we set it to dev for now because we would like to see everything on the dev environment. Then the next section is the function sections. So this section is responsible for all the Lambda functions that you are planning to deploy. And the next line over here inside the function is post order. So this is the name of the function, right? It can be any name that makes sense to, for what function do. So now the coming like next line is handler. So handler is nothing but it points to a file, okay, which contains your Lambda function code. So for example, over here, handler, there should be a file name with handler.js, which should have one export for post order function inside that handler.js. So always remember, this is the name of the file that you want to point to, and this will be the, Lambda function name that you would like to, write the code for. Then we have events, which defines what is the triggering point that makes your Lambda function to run. So I want my Lambda function to be triggered when somebody hit an API, let's say in this case HTTP call, and that's why I added HTTP. And then path is like post order API is the API path, URL path, and it should be post call. And then I enabled CORS. So it allows external domains to interact with the API that you are creating, which is useful for the front end integration. Now coming to the next part, which is plugin serverless offline. So this is a very important plugin. I would not go deep into that because I'm planning to create a separate session for this particular plugin. But on a very high level, this plugin allows you to do everything you want to do for AWS serverless without connecting to your real AWS account. So everything on your local. So that's what this plugin means. So you can test your serverless application locally. It simulates your AWS Lambda function, API gateway, all on your local machine. So that is the importance of this plugin. So we'll see that maybe in a separate video, but this video will I'll try to cover important pieces of Lambda functions. Now, you know that on Lambda, AWS Word, we have roles which are connected to policies. It's like we cannot give everything to every single resource, service. So, for example, this particular API Lambda function, we want to give some roles. So, of course, serverless YAML allows you to, to create those roles, attach, some policies to those roles automatically. So over here, you see resources. This is a section which allows you to define additional AWS resources which are using cloud formation template, at the end. So in this case, what we are doing, we are writing a role. Okay. The name of the role is Lambda execution role. It could be any name which you want to define. And then we are defining the type here. So type specifies the resource type. Okay. So over here, this Lambda execution role is of resource role type, which is an AWS identity and access management role. Now the properties here for that particular roles define properties. So for example, role name will be the Lambda execution role. Then assume policy, that is what you want to define, who can assume this role. So in this case, you want Lambda service. So that is why over here you see Lambda service, lambda.amazon aws.com is allowed to assume this particular role. And then we have over here effect, which simply says the action of the statement. It sets to allow, meaning that assuming role is permitted. Okay. Principal means the entity allowed to assume the role. Here is the Lambda service, which is responsible. Coming to the part policies. So policies define specific permission that you want to give, to that particular rule. So over here, let's say I want to give the name policy like Lambda execution policy, and then policy document defines what actions you're going to give, to that particular policy. So I want to say that I want to allow in my policy create log group. So it will create CloudWatch log groups. Then next is it will create log stream um, in the log groups, and then it write log events to the stream. So yeah, so in short, like these roles are created automatically by the AWS CloudFormation when the serverless framework deploys your stack. A resource section in the serverless.yaml defines the IAM role. Okay, in this case, Lambda execution role. And when we run this SLS deploy, CloudFormation will provision that role as part of a deployment process. So yeah, that's how it works. So let's quickly go and try to understand this piece of code like handler.js, because this is the name of the file. Always remember, and then this is the name of the Lambda function. So as I said, I already had, some snippet of the code which will save your time and mine as well. So I will just go and copy paste this Lambda function over here. So I just pasted it here. So this is a very basic Lambda function, which is like post order, and then it is receiving the event from, whatever it is coming in, and then it is preparing a dummy order response and then returning it. It's very simple. And yeah. So now the next part, which is impossible, which is now we are going to see is we will see how this service runs. So we will deploy this service to AWS account. So since I already have my AWS CLI connected to a AWS account, my real account, so I'll be using my sudo command to run those. So I'll use sudo sls deploy. Let me run it. It's asking my password. Here we go. So now you see sudo SLS deploy will start packaging, and then you see CloudFormation template is getting created, and then it will slowly, prepare everything and deploy. So let's wait for a few seconds, I would say, and then I'll come back to you with when it's done. Okay, so now over here you see that my service is deployed, and you see this SLS Lambda API dev is the default environment which I already selected here. I mean, used. So it created a service cell SLS Lambda API and then hyphen dev, and then it is also created a API gateway with this post order endpoint, and this is the Lambda function which it created. So now we'll go and quickly check how these things looks on my AWS console. So I'm here. I go into the Lambda function. So you see here SLS Lambda API post order. This is one of the Lambda function which got created automatically by my serverless framework. And then you see here all the code which is responsible for my Lambda function to be executed. So yeah, this very simple. I think everybody understand now. And similarly, if I go and check my API gateway, so I should see one of the API which automatically gets created by my serverless framework. So you see here dev SLS Lambda API. If I go here, so you see the post order API has been created. So post, one of the method which is already there. Um, Now we will see in real action how this API work, and we will also validate if my resources which we have given over here, like are the logs visible on my CloudWatch log groups, log streams, and or not. And everything we'll see when we try to run this particular API, and we'll see if my Lambda function is picking the message which we are using, which we are sending from a API. So I will use curl here. We can use any tool in order to make a HTTP call. So let me go and quickly prepare a curl object. Okay, so if you see here, I just prepared one curl sample uh, uh, string to make a curl request. So I go to my terminal and I just use the curl, and this is using the same post API URL. I hit enter. And now you see here, I see a response message, order process successfully, order details, this, and then timestamp. So I tell you guys, like this is all coming from the Lambda function. Okay, so guys, it is very important for you to understand that for everything which we are creating here, there are the logs which we can easily see. So let me quickly go and check. So I already, given all the permissions for my log group and log stream and put log events. So everything that we are doing from HTTP call, triggering a Lambda function should all be available into my logs. So I clicked on logs, and you see here this is one log group which was created automatically. And then you see here, the logs. So over here you see all the logs which are available for whenever I'm writing in or hitting anything. So this is how you can uh, check your API logs um, and things like that. So let me quickly hit the API one more time. Here we go. And now you see it's loading the events. Yeah. So now you see here all the logs which you see are directly coming and writing to the CloudWatch events. So yeah, that's for this particular video. We will see next, as I promised, that how you can play around with all these things on your local using serverless offline plugin, which is very important because sometimes what you do, you just play around with your AWS account and you forgot to, you forget to delete or destroy those services, and then you charge for something. And you can avoid this if you can play all this on your local.